This next topic is gonna be a bit of a deep dive into some harmony topics, things that I wouldn't necessarily be covering super soon in the Music Theory 101 series that we've been doing. But if you feel like this is too advanced for you, if you feel like you're getting lost, don't worry. I will be having plenty of videos coming out on my YouTube, streams that I'll be doing here on Twitch, that will be explaining a lot of these things. I'm going to assume, if you are following this, that you have a background knowledge of triads, of extended chords, maybe not a full understanding of extended chords, but you should know what they are, as well as functional harmony. If you understand those three concepts, then you're going to be totally fine. You'll understand everything about this lecture. If not, don't worry, I'll try to keep it simple. I'll try to provide examples as we go. But it should hopefully not be the worst. Dragon Effect, someone in chat right now, asked me last week about how to think about inversions. He has a bunch of questions that I'm currently looking at on my other monitor over here about how inversions affect certain chord progressions, sort of the whys of like, well, why does this work, this doesn't? How do we perceive these things? How do we understand these things? A lot of this is going to be my perspective on the matter. I wouldn't say that this is a 100%, again, definitive answer. Music theory is a descriptive art, or a descriptive practice. So a lot of this is an attempt to explain what is, not to explain how it should be. Some of these things are pretty understood universally. Other things are going to be maybe just my own way of thinking about it. If you have a different way of thinking about these things, feel free to tell me in the comments or tell me in chat, and hopefully we will better develop our understanding together of this topic. First off, quick refresher. Assuming you know this already, inversions are just when you have a different note from the root of the chord in the bass. Why does that matter? Well, if I'm writing a chord progression, let's say I want to do a 1, 4, 5, 1 chord progression. Nice and easy. We have C major, F major, to G major, to C major. Now, what if I want to stay on that C a little bit longer? Well, I can use two inversions to get there. First, I'm gonna go to a 5 chord in its second inversion, and then I'm going to return to C in its first inversion. Let me pull this up an octave so you can see. So now, we've technically visited the 5 there, but this doesn't quite feel the same as this chord right here and this chord right here. Even though functionally speaking they are both dominant chords, we feel them different. This one feels almost lighter in a way. I'll hold off a little bit on why that particular chord feels the way it is. I want to hold off on that so that we can talk about a certain thing called the cadential 6/4 chord. But for now, you can think about it as this chord right here is really just a passing chord on the way to this chord. A way for us to go away from C without really leaving the space of C. And then we land on this, where we're still playing a C, we're still playing our 1 chord, but the bass is pushing us into an area of new harmonic context. A big part about inversions is how the bass makes you feel. The order of the notes up here doesn't really matter. This chord is the same as this chord, which is the same as this chord. They're all the same chord, provided you have a certain note in the bass. So we have this chord, this chord, 6th chord, they're all the same feeling because we have do in our bass. If you've ever watched Adam Neely, he has mentioned on his YouTube channel before how being a bass player makes him feel powerful because he has control over the rest of the band. The notes he plays will determine how all of the other notes are perceived, how they're contextualized. And inversions are, inversions are a big part of that. When you have the root in the bass, it feels very solid. You're reinforcing that harmonic overtone series where every time you double the number, you get the octave of it. So when you're playing that in the bass, what you're also hearing is this, this, and this. So you're really reinforcing that root note. If you're playing in first inversion, there's more of the third now present. It's almost like we're sort of like hinting at that E minor chord, even though we're still in our C major chord, right? It's a much more understated version of the tonic. The tonic on root position feels like we're home. The tonic in first inversion feels like we're at our neighbor's house. We can see our house, but our neighbor is there saying, hey, your house looks really nice. Why, thank you. Oh, no problem. There's one more inversion we can go through here, and I'm going to now climb up to it. Using a first or a root position subdominant or predominant chord. Now, oh, what just happened there? So what am I playing in my right hand? What is this? We have C, E, and G. We have the same root chord. We've arrived there, but the bass is playing the dominant. We can now move these two notes down to here, and we're playing the dominant chord. And my shoulders are tensing up because of the tension in that sequence, because what it wants to hear is that nice, satisfying resolution. Historically, we only really see the root chord in its second inversion when we are hearing it in context of the cadence at the end of a musical phrase that's leading into our dominant chord. This, the second inversion, even if we're down here, is the most unstable of the inversions. Mostly because, again, going back to the stacking of harmonics, now we have more of the fifth than our root in the chord. We have the dominant note kind of budging its way in, forcing its way into our ears and saying, hey, I'm here, I'm dominant. If you go back to, the Baroque era and stuff like that, a lot of these things came about because, we were hearing all these harmonies and we wanted to use this thing called a suspension. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to suspend these notes right here and let them fall to the notes of our 5 chord. And then we end on our root. That is, again, the cadential 6/4 chord. It can be used outside of this context now. None of these things are any concrete rules. This is just an attempt to describe what happened. But if you want to extend a chord progression, inversions are a great way to do it. And if you're trying to extend the final part of your song where you want to have this big epic moment, that resolution helps. When you want to play with these inversions, another thing that can help is to ask how final you want it to feel. Because again, the second inversion, where the fifth is in the bass, feels the most unstable. The third feels more stable, but not like we're at home. And then the root in the bass, no inversion, feels the most grounded. It feels the least like it wants to move anywhere. If you're going through a chord progression, and I'm going to do this all in root position to start, instead of going back to there, we've completed that 1-4-5-1, but we're no longer in the position of we're at the end of what feels like the song. I just made my chord progression like 2 or 3 chords longer just by picking a different bass note. And I can keep it going because our ears are waiting for that big, heavy bass note. I guess the only other thing that we really should be brushing up on, because I think that's really all there is I have to say right now about inversions. Honestly, there's not really much else to say when it comes to triad specifically and functional harmony. It's all a matter of just kind of teasing out how stable a certain chord is and allowing yourself room to pass between notes. Like again, this note right here, this 6-4 right here in the 1 in root position, 5 in second inversion, or a 5-6-4 chord, which I guess we could actually really quick, we'll talk about why we call this a 6-4 chord, to this, which is a 1-6 chord. Again, this chord doesn't really exist except to get us to there. And for every other chord, it's just a matter of finding out, like, well, what chord can we go to that allows us to smoothly move between these bass notes, allow for a more melodic bass line. So actually, we are going to take a quick detour before we end on extended harmony or extended chords and inversions by talking about the inversion numbers, because I think this might be helpful. Even if you know what inversions are, first, second, and third inversion, stuff like that, this will be helpful. And if you have no experience, hopefully this will explain a lot of the stuff you see in analysis. If I have a chord, I'm going to just do some quick notation here. If I have a C major chord, which would look something like this, if we look at the distance between these notes and then compare that to the same chord with the E in the bass, this is an E, or excuse me, this is an E. And then I'm going to compare it with a G in the bass, which will be, I think, the easiest way to draw that would be to do this. So just to label, you have C, then D, then E, F in the space, G in the line, A, B, C, D, E, F, then G on the space. What is the distance between E and C here? We have 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We have the distance of a sixth in here. So this is a 1 chord. You could also call this, if you assume that like this C was up here, like you could also assume that there's an E right here. This would be also considered a 5-3 chord, because there is, if I have this G up here, you have a fifth above the root note, and you have a third above the root note. Whereas 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So assuming this jumps down here and this still continues, we still perceive it as a 5 and a 3 over the bass. Exactly. Trust me. This is where it comes from. And we'll get into this more when we get into analysis with Roman numerals and stuff. It'll make more sense. This is why I said you should have some functional harmony background. But let's look at this. The distance now between E and C is, again, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So we have a 1, 6 with an implied 3, because the distance between E and G is a 3. But we don't need that, because the 6 explains that same piece of information. So a 6 or a 6-3 is first inversion. And now let's go from here. Let's count up from the G. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We can ignore this because it's the same note. That's a G right up there. So we have a note on 4 and a note on 6. So we have another 6th here, but we need to delineate it from the 6-3. So we'll call this a 1-6-4, because the important intervals are a 6th over a bass and a 4th over a bass. This is why we call this root position. This is a first inversion. This is a second inversion. There's one more, but before we get there, I want to point out this comes from something called figured bass, which was a style of writing music back in the olden days, where you had your little your music staff, and then instead of the treble clef, we're gonna have our good friend the bass clef, which is like a sideways frowny face with a bit of an extended mouth, also known as the F clef, because these two notes are, or these two dots are surrounding the letter F on the keyboard. You would see stuff like this with like nothing. This would have a 6 under there. This would have a 5-3. This would have a 6-4, etc. And you, as the performer, would have to automatically, on the spot, understand what you're supposed to play, because you can actually determine everything about the harmony from this. So this first one, this is the note C. There is no number there. So I could say that's just C major. This right here is a, I think I did it wrong. I think that's actually, this is an A, that's a B. Oh no, this is A, this is C. That's what I did wrong. Okay, so have C here, and then we'll go to E, then we'll go to F, and then we'll go to G. Right, we'll just do that. So this is nothing, this will be a 6, this will be a 5-3, and this will be a 6-4. There we go, that'll make sense. Okay, so again, this first chord, where this note is the letter C, there's no number, root position. This is an E with a 6 in the bass, or with a 6 underneath. So we're implying 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. This is E, F, G, A, B, C. So, E in the bass, a C above. C major. F with a 3rd and a 5th in the bass. That would be a D minor in first inversion. Or excuse me, that is, we don't have to do that because that's just our starting one. I just realized we actually don't need to do that. I messed it up. This was supposed to be, actually, this is actually supposed to be the chord we were going to go into. I just realized it's supposed to be a 5-2. Or sometimes is written as a 2. And that is actually this chord right here. And that goes to our 6-4. It might even be, no, it's a 4-2. Sorry, I got that wrong. It's 4-2, not 5-2. Sorry, it's been a while since I've thought about a lot of this stuff. I haven't really thought about figured bass in like 3 years, 4 years, so forgive me That's just to explain why we have this analysis. But let's say we have a C major 7th chord, which is C, E, G, B. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So you will see this written one of 3 ways. This can be seen as a 1, 6, 4, 2, because that's the complete sequence above it. Usually, you don't see the 6. It's most commonly seen as a 1, 4, 2 chord, because there's a 4th and a 2nd over the root. And sometimes you will just see it written as a 1 with a 2 next to it. That sounds like this. You have the 6th, the 4th, and the 2nd. I personally like 4-2 because I find that to be the most visible way of seeing this. Plus, we don't have to differentiate between any other things. So this is my preferred naming scheme for inversions, where this is also known as the 3rd inversion. So you have the 1 chord, hidden 5-3. You have the 1-6 with a hidden 3. You have the 1-6-4 to distinguish between the 6, and the 1-4-2 or 6-4-2 or just 2. These are the accepted inversions of triads and 7th chords. Dragon Effect had a question about how do inversions apply to extended harmony. This is the extent of what is universally accepted as extended harmony inversions. 7ths are generally accepted because of the dominant 7th chord, this tonality right here. Because that's like so common. It can still work for obviously major 7ths and for minor 7ths. But things get a little bit weird when we start talking about upper extended harmony, or the tones beyond the 7th. Now, let's look at a C 9th chord. In first inversion, in second inversion, and in third inversion. Now, I'm personally not sure how to identify this. If I have a C major over D, since the D doesn't really show up super early in the harmonic overtone series of the notes, we're kind of in this weird ambiguous space with a lot of seconds and fourths. It's very open sounding. It doesn't really feel like it wants to go in any particular harmonic direction. So it's hard to really describe it. You could say that is a 4-2 chord, or actually, let's look at how this would go. You have D, E, G, C. This is a 7-4-2 chord, and that's not super common. And if you remember, a 6-4-2 or a 4-2 is just a 7th chord. So it's almost like we're in this weird E minor 7th. Oh yeah, no, absolutely. It's a great point. And that's kind of why this is the case it is. And we'll find with some of the other extended chords that you'll have a similar sort of thing. Like, let's talk about the, not the 11th, because the 11th in the bass, it has, again, it's a similar kind of ambiguity to the 9th. But let's look at this for a second. What I'm playing is I'm playing what we would call a sixth chord, where it's a major chord where you add the major sixth. First inversion. We're in a pretty good spot. Okay, second inversion. Pretty nice. Third inversion. So I'm playing A, C, E, G. Am I playing C major sixth or am I playing A minor seventh? Yeah, it's an A minor seventh chord. So functionally, how do we describe that? How do you describe the major sixth chord or the sixth chord in second inversion? Great answer. I love that. It depends on the context, right? Now, I personally err on the side of sixth chords in second inversion can exist, just as sixth chords in first inversion can exist. I love that feeling. It's a very open chord. You have these two minor thirds kind of stacked on top of each other without being an actual series of minor thirds. This really nice open feeling. And apparently, I found this out. I've mentioned this story before. Apparently, getting to that point is a pretty common occurrence. So much so that when I first asked my advanced music theory professor if you can have a sixth chord in first inversion, he said, congratulations, you have now gotten to the point of Arnold Schoenberg in like the late 1800s, early 1900s, back before he started his whole atonal business. He asked the question of, can you do that? And his answer was, yes, I can, because I did it right there. Even though other people at the time were saying, no, that's just a minor seventh chord. Like, no, it's a sixth chord, because I want it to be. And that's the beauty of harmony for me. That's the beauty of music in general for me, is that there comes to be a point where even the most universally accepted ideas fall apart as you layer on other foundational ideas. Inversions are standard. We all can understand inversions if you understand the basics of functional harmony and the role of the bass. We all understand extended chords if you understand how triadic harmony works, how you can go up in thirds to get all of these extra upper tones. But once you combine those two things together, we get this really weird ambiguity. That is really just to say, don't worry too much about how it should work. Think about how it sounds to your ears. Think about where the notes are guiding your ears. The voice leading between each note in the chord is, in my opinion, way more important than any sort of theoretical rule. That's why, for me, this is still a C chord. That's still a C chord to me because of how I want to use it, because of where I feel that sound leading towards. Feel free to write up your own rules. Maybe you think that should always be a minor seventh. Maybe you think it could be another chord. It could be like some weird E chord. Like you could argue that this is a E minor, add 4, add 6, no 5. I just justified having that as an E chord. You can too. If you're watching this at home, please feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. Do all the YouTube stuff. Click the little bell thing. Let me know what you think about triads, if you agree or disagree with my analysis, if you feel like there's anything that I should have added or anything you feel like I should have focused in on. I will maybe do an update to this video later, but I think that was a pretty comprehensive analysis. Please check me out on Twitch, twitch.tv/MusarMakes. That's where we do these streams every single Thursday, starting at 12 noon Pacific Standard Time. Check me out on Patreon, patreon.com/MusarMakes, where I'm going to be uploading these videos early. I'm going to get back on doing that, and you can get a discount on private lessons with me. I think that's it. Oh, check out social media, Twitter, check me out on Discord. I have a great community, and this will be where we cut the video.